Plains Indians Part 2. People of the Plains. The Native Americans of the Great Plains were hunters, farmers, and warriors. They dressed according to the job they were performing and the climate they were in. Here are examples of the typical dress of some of the peoples of the Great Plains. So the very first one that we see is the Gros Ventre, and these are the nomadic nations here in blue. So we have the Cheyenne, the Plains Cree, we have the Plains Apache, the Arapaho, the Comanche, the Crow, the Assiniboine, the Sioux, Blackfeet, and the Kiowa. The sedentary nations included the Kanza, the Arikara, the Omaha, the Caddo, the Mandan, the Hidatsa, Osage, Pawnee, and the Wichita. The spirit world. Plains Indians lived close to nature. They saw no separation between the natural world and the supernatural or spirit world. They believed that supernatural power filled every part of their lives and that their survival depended on living in harmony with this power. Plains Indians called on the spiritual power often, and in many ways, medicine men and women could use it to heal others. When seeking spiritual guidance, a Plains Indian could go on a vision quest. Let's say it was a man, though women also did it. He would go to an isolated spot and stay there alone. He would fast, pray, and stay awake for a few days. He hoped that a guardian spirit would grant a vision. What was seen in the vision would symbolize the individual's guardian spirit. Animals or natural forces, such as thunder or lightning, were often the messengers who brought the vision. After receiving a vision, the seeker returned to camp. He would visit the shaman, medicine man, or woman, who would interpret the vision. A medicine bundle would be prepared with sacred objects relating to the vision. This precious possession represented a person's spiritual life. It had power to protect and heal. A Comanche bundle might contain sweetgrass, a deer's tail, small stones, a bird's claw, and beaver oil. Nations also had medicine bundles that were sacred to them. Most Plains nations believed in a supreme power. The Sioux called this power Wakantanka, or the Great Spirit. Other nations had similar names for this power. The Great Spirit was the source of all medicine, but there were also lesser spirits. The sun, which was seen as the giver of life, was an important spirit. Every morning, the first thing that Plains Indians did was give prayers of thanks to the sun. The spirit's blessing was sought for every new project, large or small. There were always celebrations before big events, such as buffalo hunts or battles. These ceremonies included singing, drumming, dancing, and prayers. Before a buffalo hunt, dancers in buffalo masks imitated the animal's movements. Sometimes they danced for days. A dancer doing the buffalo bull dance of the Mandan is shown here to the right. Most Plains nations practiced a yearly ritual called the sun dance. It was a time for the whole group to seek the blessing of the spirits. There were differences, but also similarities between these rituals. In general, men who had made special vows danced from 1 to 4 days and nights, accompanied by singing and drumming. Often, the participants performed certain ritual sacrifices, such as fasting or going without drinking water. Certain men and women received such powerful visions that they became shamans or medicine people. Some used their special powers along with herbs and rituals to cure illness. Others studied with an honored holy person and became spiritual guides and healers. They kept the nation's medicine bundles and conducted ceremonies or spiritual rituals. If shamans were given gifts, they usually gave them away. Plains Indians measured wealth by what a person shared with others, not by what he or she had. Changes on the plains. Almost everything Europeans did created problems for the Plains Indians. As the eastern United States became more populated, settlers pushed west. They fenced in areas where buffalo had roamed freely and Plains peoples had hunted them. Over and over, the United States made and then broke treaties, agreements, with Plains nations. The Plains Indians were pushed onto smaller and smaller pieces of land. In a short time, they lost their homes and their way of life. Plains Indians usually killed only as many buffalo as they needed, but white trappers began killing hundreds of thousands of buffalo each year to meet the growing demand for buffalo hides. More than 1.5 million hides were packed aboard trains and wagons in the winter of 1872 to 1873 alone. Settlers even shot buffalo from moving trains, leaving the animals to rot. This was a planned effort to destroy the Plains Indians' way of life. Driving them out of the area opened the plains for cattle grazing. Once there were an estimated 30 to 60 million buffalo. In a very short time, they were almost extinct. By the end of the 1800s, only a few hundred wild buffalo remained. Ahem, hands self. In the 1860s, the railroad went farther and farther west. Trains interfered with the movement of the buffalo. Trains also brought more settlers. Plains Indians were angry that the railroad tracks crossed their best hunting lands. Most tribal leaders told their warriors to stay away, but some warriors did attack railways. In 1804, President Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore a huge piece of land the U.S. had purchased from France. Their expedition traveled from near St. Louis to the Pacific Ocean and back. The reports they sent back encouraged settlers to head west. Soon, wagon trains were all over the Great Plains. Here, to the left, Sacagawea guides Lewis and Clark. Europeans brought diseases such as smallpox, measles, cholera, influenza, chickenpox, and whooping cough. Native Americans had never been exposed to these diseases, so they had no resistance to them. Huge numbers of them died. Before the 1837 smallpox epidemic, there were about 1,600 Mandan. Only about 125 survived. It is estimated that 75% of all Plains Indians died from smallpox in 1 year, 1837 to 1838. The U.S. government set up reservations for Native Americans to live on as a way to control them. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 established the Great Sioux Reservation. It covered most of present-day South Dakota, west of the Missouri River, including the Black Hills, a sacred area the Sioux called Pahasapa. When gold was found there in the 1870s, fortune seekers flooded the area. The U.S. government ordered all Sioux out of the Black Hills. Below are some members of the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. The Plains nations had lost their land and their way of making a living, so they fought many wars with the U.S. soldiers between 1854 and 1876. The Sioux and other nations defeated Lieutenant George A. Custer and more than 200 soldiers at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. It was a victory for the Indians, but Custer's last stand was the beginning of the end. The government decided to stop Indian wars of resistance. Reservation land was so poor that farming was impossible. Many people starved. Natives on reservations found comfort in the ghost dance. They believed this ritual would rid them of unwanted white settlers, restore the buffalo herds, and bring back long-departed relatives and warriors. Federal government feared the ghost dance would lead to war. In 1890, it ordered the arrest of Sioux chief Sitting Bull. This led to a gunfight. Sitting Bull and 7 of his warriors were killed. Later that year, more than 300 Sioux gathered on the bank of Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation. While giving up their weapons to U.S. soldiers, one of the Sioux fired a rifle into the air. The soldiers panicked and shot back. Cannons opened fire. Almost 200 Native American men, women, and children were killed. To many, the massacre at Wounded Knee is a symbol of how the U.S. government has failed Native Americans. Plains Indians today. They were forced onto reservations. They were stripped of their way of life and their culture. But the Plains Indians did not die. Today, whether they live on the reservation, or in towns and cities across the United States, the people of the Plains continue to honor and celebrate their heritage. In the past century, U.S. government policy towards Native Americans has changed several times. For many years, the government tried to get American Indians to give up their old ways of life and fit into the mainstream culture. Their children were sent to boarding schools. There, they were punished for speaking their own languages and practicing their culture. People whose lives had revolved around following the buffalo herds were pushed to take up farming, but were given the worst land to farm. In the 1960s, Native Americans from many nations got together. They formed the American Indian Movement. They wanted to honor their ancestors and to protect the treaties broken by the federal government. In 1973, about 250 Native Americans took over the village of Wounded Knee, South Dakota. They were protesting injustices on the Sioux Reservation at Pine Ridge. Since then, the U.S. government has given Native Americans more power to govern themselves through tribal councils. Although they had been treated as second-class citizens, many Plains Indians served the U.S. in wartime. During World War II, Comanche and Navajo soldiers above were among the Native American code talkers. They used their languages to send secret messages among different military units. Their languages were unknown to the rest of the world, so the codes were never broken. That gave the U.S. a big advantage. Powwows started in the late 19th century. They were a way for Native Americans to express pride in their culture. Now, every year, hundreds of powwows are held on reservations all over the country. Powwows are often family reunions. They feature drumming, dancing, food, and elaborate modern versions of traditional dress. Because the best lands were taken away from them, reservation life has been hard for many Plains Indians. There is much unemployment and poverty on some reservations. But some nations have done better when natural resources were found on their land. For example, the Osage profited from the oil on their Oklahoma reservation. A group of Native American painters who studied at the University of Oklahoma in the late 1920s were known as the Kiowa Five. Their art focused on traditional Native life. This painting is by Monroe Tsaktoka, one of the Kiowa Five. Plains Indians writers have told their people's stories in many ways. N. Scott Momaday is Kiowa Cherokee. In 1967, he won a Pulitzer Prize for Literature for Housemaid of Dawn. His book, The Way to Rainy Mountain, tells stories of the Kiowa. Virginia Driving Hawk Sneeve, the daughter of a Lakota Sioux mother, was born on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. She has written many books for children. When Ben Nighthorse Campbell, Northern Cheyenne, was elected to the U.S. Senate, he became the first Native American in more than 60 years to hold that position. He served from 1993 to 2005. As a senator, Campbell thought himself as a representative not only of the people of Colorado, but also of all Native Americans. There's a lot on this last page of activities that you can do, but the Learn More online is what we're going to look at. Like all Native Americans, Plains nations had different kinds of government. Many Plains Indians lived in self-governing bands. A few had national levels of government that oversaw the various bands. The Mandan people had a different kind of government. Each Mandan village was governed individually. Most elected 2 men as leaders, one for war, one for peace. Plains Indian Nations tells different creation myths. These are stories about how the world was formed or how their people came to be. The Mandan origin myth says that their people once lived underground in a dark place. One day a vine grew upward and created a hole to the world above. Some of the Mandan people climbed up the vine. And that is the end of Plains Indians.